friends. It is that time of the month again where we do a reading wrap-up. So this time I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in July, and that was a total of 8 books. So it's gonna get interesting. Now, unfortunately, the first book that I read, I do not own because I actually had borrowed it from the library and I have returned it since then. But it was a 5-star read and I cannot believe that. My first book of July was a 5-star read. It was The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. Now, this book is a debut novel. Keep that in mind when I talk about it, but essentially it is about an Indigenous family in Canada and they're berry pickers, that's their profession. And one day, the 4-year-old daughter in the family goes missing, and the last person to see her was her 6-year-old brother. So he kind of grows up with the life-altering event happening and just trying to live with the fact that he feels like he could have done more to like rescue her or just keep that from happening. And it's a dual POV book with that like timeline and that stuff happening, and the other side of it is a girl named Norma who is growing up with her parents, and her father's pretty distant but her mother is extremely overprotective, and she suffers from these weird like daydreams or just dreams of like stuff happening that I don't even know how to describe it, but basically she's kind of suffering with that, and there's like family drama and family secrets that are coming alive. But essentially I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was beautiful. I thought the storytelling was amazing. The pacing was a little bit slower than I'm used to, but quite honestly, I think the storytelling and just the plot itself, it was so rich and powerful that it made up for the slower pace. All in all, I do think it was paced well. There were little like plot twists here and there that would keep me engaged the entire time, so I really never found it to be slow. I loved the storylines of these characters. I feel like the characters were complex. You follow along with them and their problems and the burdens that they have to overcome, which I think was just greatly done. I definitely recommend this book to anyone and everyone who wants to read it. The second book that I read in July was After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book, I rated it 4.25 stars, which is interesting because I usually will stick to rating books by half stars, so like 4, 4.5, 5, but I'm now kind of experimenting with quarter star ratings just because I want to see what that's like, and I feel like sometimes I couldn't decide between a 4 or 4.5, and a 4.25 felt right. But regardless, this book is a book about marriage and After I Do. This is about Lauren and Ryan, who have been married for a few years, and it just kind of getting to the nitty-gritty of marriage and what that's like. These two in their current relationship aren't super happy with each other and they feel kind of stuck in their relationship, so they decide to separate but not divorce. They're going to separate for a year and then figure it out, see what happens, and go from there. So I thought that was really interesting, and you follow the characters through that year. Mostly Lauren, we kind of stick with her the entire time because they also do no contact, so Lauren and Ryan do not talk or try not to talk during the year that they are separated. I just found this book to be very refreshing and realistic. I feel like I find that often in Taylor Jenkins Reid's works. They're just glimpses of real life but in fiction, and that's just one of my favorite parts about reading her books. But yeah, we get flashbacks, you know, from the beginning of their relationship to where they're at now, the contrasts, and then we follow them through the little rut that they're going through and as they try to figure out what they're gonna do by the end of the year. And yeah, overall it left me with some lasting impacts on not just like relationships with partners, but also friendships and family were very strong in this book, and I really appreciate that because sometimes it's just heartwarming to read about stuff like that and the way that those people in your life have effects on your relationship. It's not my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book, but I definitely enjoyed it and I would recommend it, especially I think if you find yourself in a situation like this. I think it would be a great read because it just gives you a different perspective on marriage and how people work out real relationship problems. Would recommend. Very much enjoyed this book. I think I only have like 2 other Taylor Jenkins Reid's books to read, and I will have read her entire backlog, so that's really exciting for me. Next up, or the third book that I read, was the third book in the Housemaid series by Frida McFadden. So this one is The Housemaid is Watching, and I actually ended up rating it 4.5 stars, which I feel like is really high compared to what I've seen other people rate it, but in my opinion, I just found it riveting and intriguing. Basically, you do have to read the first 2 books in this series to kind of understand what's going on here because it does follow characters from the first 2 books, and this one is a big jump in time, so we follow the same characters but it's like later in their life. Millie, who's the main character, she kind of has her own family. That's kind of where we pick up. So this one gives like that suburban family drama, neighbor secrets type of plot, which I feel like in a thriller mystery I really enjoy. I love that, like the cattiness and the neighbors peeking and what's going on, and oops, someone ends up dead, what the heck happened, who's keeping secrets from each other. I just found that to be really interesting. And honestly, like, it gave me everything a thriller mystery should give, in my opinion. It was like exciting, it was mysterious, it was suspicious, it had plot twists that I didn't see coming personally. So that's why I ended up rating it 4.5 stars, more so because, of course, I love the characters, really enjoy this story, but I feel like it just kind of tied it up in a nice little bow to end off the series. I think this is the last book in the series. Basically, what ended up happening, I didn't expect. So again, obviously you have to give points to a book for doing that and keeping you on your toes. Overall, Millie's journey has been really incredible, and I'm very happy and excited to kind of have followed her and finished her story. This is one of my favorite thriller mystery series because I feel like for beginners, it's great to like pick up and easy to follow, short chapters, extremely fast paced. If you haven't picked up any of her Freida McFadden's books, I definitely recommend this series because it's great. I do own all three, this one being my favorite, but I did still enjoy the other two, so I definitely recommend, and I think you should pick them up if you haven't read them. The third book that I read in July was Flawless by Elsie Silver. So this is the first book in the Chestnut Springs series, and I rated this overall 4 stars. I thought it was great. It was entertaining. It's a rom-com. I feel like the main plot is between a grumpy bull-riding cowboy and his sunshine people-pleasing princess. Like, that's how I would describe these two characters. I did annotate this book because I do see myself reading the rest of the series. This is definitely a great read, and you kind of start getting the tidbits of the family aspect because this is kind of a found family type of series, and you definitely get the tidbits. You get these side characters that you just want to know more about. So I'm definitely going to continue the series, and I figured I would start by annotating this one so that when I move on to the other books, I can also annotate those. So I definitely found some really cute quotes between Rhett and Summer, who are our 2 main characters. Their love story I thought was great. It was great pacing. Overall, it's just a small town romance with spice, so beware if you're not a huge spice fan. This does have some spice in it. I wouldn't say it's the spiciest romance book I've ever read, but it is in here, so keep that in mind if you're thinking of picking this up. But just overall, I'm finally happy to say that I have started Chestnut Springs, and I will be continuing it. Hopefully can finish it by the end of the year. I don't know, but I'm gonna try to make it my goal because I did really enjoy this first book, and I just want to continue reading Elsie Silver. Like, I feel like she's just so popular, and I don't want to feel left out, especially because she's starting a new series. And I think another one of the books, the first book in that new series, came out earlier this year, and I think she's releasing the next one like later this year, so I don't want to get too far behind. Definitely gonna make this series a priority. Started off with a strong start, 4 stars. I have heard that like the continuing books are even better, so definitely cannot wait. Moving on to the next book that I read, it was The Paris Daughter. Sorry, I almost dropped my phone. It was The Paris Daughter by Kristen Harmel. This book I ended up rating 4.5 stars. It is a World War II historical fiction book about 2 women. It's a lot deeper than just that, but I really enjoyed the 2 relationships in this book. They're very different, and I like how the author just kind of goes in on talking about them and showing like the contrast between that. More so, this book is also about 2 book lovers, and you can just tell one of the characters literally owns a bookstore, and it is like her pride and joy. And I just love reading books about people who love to read and who are readers and who love books, so that always hits like a little extra for me. But overall, this book I felt was very nuanced, and it just was a heartbreaking story about friendship, motherhood, survival, and guilt, and how these different aspects of war can really ruin your life. I do recommend it. This is the second book by this author that I've read, and her other book is one of my favorite books ever. I rated that one 5 stars. It's called The Book of Lost Names. That made me really interested in continuing to read this author's work, and now I have seen that she is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors because her books are just so special. They're heartbreaking, but they have so much emotion in them, and these stories are fairly complex, so I really enjoy that. Keeping that in mind though, it is historical fiction. Storytelling, again, very, very good. I know I'll be thinking about this book for quite a bit of time. I never really felt like too slow or anything because we do get 2 kind of POVs in the different women's, you know, relationships. Basically, this woman has a daughter, and she is best friends with another woman who owns a bookstore, but the war is kind of ramping up, and the woman has no choice but to leave her daughter behind with her best friend. And yeah, it kind of just unravels from there. Again, I mentioned there's topics of like survival and guilt and tragedy that we just really take a deep dive, and we follow these characters, so obviously their stories mean a lot. I guess this author has quite a few other books that she's written, so I can't wait to check these out. This one I think came out last year, so in 2023 it's fairly new. Okay, the next book I do not own because I actually listened to it through audiobook, so shout out to Spotify for hooking that up. But it was First Light Wins, and I rated this book 3 stars. I thought it was good. It started off really like on a strong note. I feel like literally the first chapter or the first scene gave me really big Don't Worry Darling vibes, like the dinner scene, because there's like some secrets that you can tell right off the bat that are being suppressed, and there's like drama between friendships, and yeah, you're just kind of getting a lay of the land, and I really enjoyed that opening scene. I thought it was great. From there, I feel like it was good, but I feel like the book kind of slowed down in the middle. It got a little bit slow, and I was like, again, it was audiobook, so I was just kind of like driving, would find myself getting distracted because it wasn't super engaging, and then I feel like I kind of lost the plot at some point and it was a little bit hard to follow. So for those reasons, I rated it a 3. It is a thriller mystery. And then the ending was good too. There was a great payoff, but again, for the reasons of like it being a little bit slow in the middle and me getting a little bit confused about like what the heck was going on, because this main character, it's basically one main character, but she has like flashbacks, and then we go back to present time, but then we go back, and it's just a lot of back and forth. And she's kind of a person who has like, she takes on different jobs, and so she has like these different characters that she plays, so in these different character roles she knows different people. So I feel like there was just a lot of characters and a lot of names going on, and again, listening to it via audiobook, I was just getting a little bit lost. But overall, it was pretty engaging. It's a super popular book. I think it was January's Reese's Book Club's pick. So again, super popular, and I do recommend it, but maybe physically, I feel like I would have read it quicker, and I maybe wouldn't have gotten as lost if I read it physically. Moving on to the last 2 books that I read in July, I feel like I'm the last person on earth to read this next book, but it was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This was the last Emily Henry book that I hadn't read. So now I can happily say that I've read all of Emily Henry's books, and this one I actually really enjoyed. I rated it 4 stars. I feel like some people don't rate this one as high, but I just found it really engaging and charming. Basically, this is a story about Poppy and Alex, who are 2 best friends who meet in high school, or in high school. And basically every year they plan like a trip, like a vacation, and they go together until they end up going to Croatia 2 years ago, and something happens where they just stop talking, like no contact. And then we flash forward 2 years, they haven't spoken, but they Poppy finds herself wanting to kind of rekindle that friendship. She misses Alex. She finds that she's not happy. Like she's happy in like her job and in the family sense, but she's just missing something, and that something is Alex. She kind of tries to rekindle that relationship or friendship, and then they go back on another trip, and we kind of start off from there. It is a romance, so I really enjoyed it. I felt like the whole time I was pretty engaged. It is a little bit of dual timelines because we like I mentioned, there is a little bit of time jumping, but it's very easy to follow, and basically we're just recapping from when they met on to the present time. So we go through like their yearly trips and kind of what happens. We don't get too much like information about what actually happened on the Croatia vacation, unless maybe I checked out while I was reading this book, but I kind of don't even recall like what actually happened. I have an idea, but I'm also like, I feel like it's made a pretty big deal because obviously this like ended their friendship for some time, but like looking back, I don't really even remember what happened. So I don't know, that might be a me problem, or that might be just the way that the book was written and we just didn't get very much detail about it, but just a fair warning for that. But other than that, I really enjoyed the romance aspect of this book. I feel like it was believable and I was invested in their relationship. I love a friends to lovers story or trope, so that's obviously big points for me because this is like the main trope in this book. Definitely the perfect like beach read, summer read, so you have 1 more month if you want to pick this up. August would be a great month to read this book in, and yeah, I think it's maybe my top 3 or 4 Emily Henry book. I haven't decided yet, but it's definitely up there. There are some other Emily Henry books that I would probably rate below this one just because I found it so charming, and again, like friends to lovers is one of my favorite romance tropes. So the last book that I read in July, Beautiful Boy by David Sheff. This is a nonfiction book, and it is basically a story about a father and a son. And we mostly focus on the father, who is trying to live with and navigate his son's addiction to meth or methamphetamine. Pretty heavy. It took me a while to read, I feel like, because it just was pretty heavy and I had to take some time to like process these things. You really just do a deep dive into addiction and how that literally ruins not only the addict's life, but also your family and people around you. So obviously we get the point of view of the father and everything he did to try to help his son overcome this disease and just the effects that it had on him. And I just found it very informative, very educational. I did not rate it because I don't rate nonfiction reads, but I do definitely recommend it. I think it's a movie now because this has Steve Carell and Timothée Chalamet on the cover, and it does say now a major motion picture. So I do want to check it out and see like what it's like compared to the book. So overall, this book is pretty heartbreaking because you go back and forth into someone's addiction recovery. So basically it's a deep dive into struggle and heartbreak, but also the love and courage that it takes for both parent and addict to survive the disease of addiction. So definitely recommend. It is a bit heavy, maybe check your trigger warnings, but I do recommend and I did enjoy it. But that is going to be all for my reads in July. It was 8 books total, and again, it was another great reading month because I feel like I usually average like 4 books a month, and these last 2 months have been really great. So hopefully trying to manifest a good August reading month. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!